I just spent 3 pretty strange weeks with the iPad Mini 6. Like, if you love tablets like I do, you've probably heard some people say that the Mini 6 is a terrible iPad, they would never get it, or they're taking it back. And then others say that it's an incredible iPad and it's exactly what they want. So how could that be? How is it possible for people to have such drastically different opinions about the same device? If we start out by looking at the size, I've gotten comments in my videos saying that the iPad Mini is too small. And, well, yeah, I mean, it's called a Mini, so that's pretty much the point. I mean, Apple already makes a 10.2-inch iPad 9, a 10.9-inch iPad Air, and then an 11-inch and a 12.9-inch iPad Pro. So there's plenty of options if the 8.3-inch display isn't big enough for you. Like with any device, it's important that you look at what you need based on how you plan on using it, and then prioritize the features and benefits. So for example, if you want a larger display for watching content or for multitasking, then you're going to be giving up on portability and handling. That's just how it works. Personally, I wasn't sure if the iPad Mini 6 would provide enough of a benefit because of its size, but I was wrong. When we look at the design, Apple essentially shifted from the iPad Mini 5 looking like a smaller iPad 9 to the iPad Mini 6 pretty much looks like a squished down iPad Air 4. I really like this newer and more portable design, and I like the smaller bezels all the way around because they give us a larger display in the same size footprint. Now, some people think that the bezels are too big, but they're actually smaller than the ones on the iPad Air 4, and they're there to prevent any inadvertent activation of the touchscreen when you're handling the Mini. Now, so far, the Mini has been working great for me. So whether I'm gaming in landscape mode, surfing the web, reading, or using the Apple Pencil, this has been a super comfortable device to handle. Again, it comes down to what you're looking for. So for example, if I'm laying in bed, I really like reading on the iPad Mini 6. It's clearly bigger than my 13 Pro, and it's a much better user experience than trying to read with the iPad 9 or the iPad Air 4. If I want to do some multitasking, then of course I prefer a larger display or a higher resolution. But for how I use it, I appreciate the fact that I still have all those tablet capabilities in a smaller form factor. Now, as part of this new design, we're also getting a newer Touch ID that's incorporated into the power button at the top. And what I did was program both my index fingers. So if I pick it up in portrait mode, I use my right hand. And then if I pick it up in landscape mode, then I use my left hand. This is the same thing that I was doing on the iPad Air 4, so I was already used to it. Now, something else that I've seen other people talk about is the volume up and down controls that were moved up to the top. Now, of course, Apple did this because the entire right side is dedicated to the 2nd generation Apple Pencil. And this way I can pair, charge, and store the Pencil with the Mini, and it just leaves no room for adding buttons on the right side. Now, I'm glad that they didn't put the buttons on the opposite side because most of the time when I'm watching content in landscape mode, it would be on the bottom. Not to mention that if you had it on a trifold case, then you really wouldn't have access to them. I also like the fact that they made the button functionality automatically adjust to the orientation of the device. So if you're holding it in landscape mode, then the top button turns the volume up and the bottom one turns it down. So whether you're holding it like that or like this, again, the top one is up, down is down. And then if you're holding it in portrait mode, then the buttons correlate to the on-screen display. So the volume goes this way. So right makes it go up, left makes it go down. And I've never actually held it upside down, but even if you do, still right would make it go up and left would make it go down, just like what you're seeing on the display. Now, speaking of volume, there are 2 speakers, one on each side, and even though there are 4 speaker grills, there are only 2 speakers. As far as quality, I think these speakers sound good for small tablet speakers. They're way better than my phone, they're better than the iPad 9, but they're not quite as good as the ones on the iPad Air 4, and definitely not as good as the ones on the iPad Pro. Now back to the design, let's talk about the port. So Apple went with a faster and more powerful USB-C port, which makes sense. I mean, there are no current devices that still use a Lightning port, which actually brings me to the display. And this has been one of the most controversial aspects of the iPad Mini. Now, the quality of the display is quite good. It has the same 500 nits of max brightness as the iPad Air 4, but with a higher pixel per inch count. And you should definitely watch my comparison of the two, so I'll link to it at the end of this video. Now, for everything that I've done, from watching video to using various productivity apps, taking notes, marking up documents, and then playing games, this display has been great. So now let's talk about a few of the comments that I've gotten about the display. Now, one of the things that you may notice on the home screen is the amount of padding around the apps. And this is interesting because it's just a comment on the aesthetics and it's more of like an optical illusion. Now, why do I say that? Because if you actually look at the amount of padding that we have, it's very similar to or even smaller than what we have on the iPad 9 and the iPad Air 4. It's just more noticeable because this is a smaller device. It's also not limiting how many apps we're actually getting. So just like on the iPad Air 4 and the iPad 9, we're getting 6 rows of 5 apps. So that's 30 apps per page. And on the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, we get 5 rows of 6 apps. So it's the same number of apps even in that case. So could there be some iPadOS updates that would spread the icons out a bit and then maybe use more of the screen? Sure, but does this actually impact how I interact with the device or my actual user experience? No. And that brings me to the jelly effect. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, it's something that you may notice if you're holding the iPad mini in portrait mode and you're scrolling. So based on how the display refreshes, when you're scrolling vertically at certain speeds, you can see that straight horizontal lines appear to have a slight angle to them. And if you keep going up and down, it creates this sort of like rolling shutter effect, which will make sense to the other camera nerds who are watching this. So can you notice this if you're looking for it? Absolutely. But did I notice it before Twitter told me all about it? No. And now that I know that it's there, is there anything that I do on the Mini that somehow suffers because of this? Not at all. This also doesn't happen in landscape mode, so if I'm gaming, watching a video, or using an app in that orientation, then obviously it's not an issue. If I'm in portrait mode and I'm scrolling vertically in a browser or on Twitter, then yeah, I can see it, but it's not really ruining my experience. So in this case, I can really see both sides of the argument, because if this is something that's gonna bother you, then I wouldn't get the iPad mini because you will notice it. But if you're like me, you look at it and you say, yeah, I can see it. I wish it wasn't there, but it's not the end of the world. And there are enough other benefits to the iPad mini for what I need, then it's not really that big a deal. Next, I quickly wanted to talk about battery life. I'm working on a more detailed video about this, but generally speaking, the battery on the Mini is fine. It's not the best that I've ever had on the tablet, and it's not the worst. Again, like I said, I'm working on something that's super fun. It's coming soon, so stay tuned. Now I want to talk about my multitasking experience, because there are sort of two ways to look at the iPad Mini. If you're comparing it to a larger iPad, then again, by definition, of course, everything is going to be smaller. The resolution may not be higher on something like the iPad 9, but things will still look bigger. So if a larger iPad is your point of reference, then the Mini will come up short. But if you're looking at it from the perspective of being able to do everything that you can do on a larger iPad, but on a smaller and more portable device, or if you compare it to a phone, then you can clearly see the benefits of the Mini 6. And with the new A15 Bionic chip, there's really nothing that I tried to do on this iPad that it can't do, and that includes photo and video editing. Now, another big update that I've been using a lot is the front-facing camera. It's an ultra-wide 12-megapixel f2.4 camera that has a feature called Center Stage. So basically it uses the 2x zoom out capability of the camera, and it combines that with artificial intelligence to identify and then track a subject as it moves through the frame. So basically you could just put your iPad down and then walk around your kitchen or around the room, and the iPad Mini will zoom in and out so that you're always properly framed. It works with FaceTime, Zoom, and for TikTok, and it'll be interesting to see if more apps start taking advantage of this feature. I use Center Stage every time I'm on a FaceTime call right now, and it just adds a little bit of a dynamic aspect to video calls and definitely to the content that you're creating. Now, the rear-facing camera, I'm not really going to go to in too much detail. It's a 12-megapixel f1.8 camera, and it's actually pretty good, so if you plan on using it, you won't be disappointed. Now, I pretty much use my phone for that type of content, and I really just mostly use the front-facing camera, and I haven't done a lot of shooting with the rear-facing camera beyond doing testing for image quality. Now let's get to what might be my favorite thing about the iPad Mini 6. Gaming. I like gaming on the iPad Mini so much more than I thought I would. The size when I hold it in landscape mode is perfect. It's definitely bigger than my phone, so the game feels significantly more immersive than playing on my phone. And at the same time, the Mini is smaller, lighter, and more comfortable to hold than the larger iPads. Now, because of this channel, I have all the current iPads. And ever since I got the Mini, this is definitely the one that I reach for when I want to play a game. And this is really strange to me because if you had told me before that this would be the iPad that I would choose, I'd be like, there's no way. Like, why would I pick a smaller display when I have another one right here? Now, the only time I end up picking a larger iPad for gaming is if I want to pair my Xbox controller and then play games using Xbox Game Pass. Because in that situation, I'm really only using the iPad as a display and I'd rather have a larger one. But in terms of actually holding the iPad while you're playing, this is pretty hard to beat. Now, I've been able to play every game that I've tried, including PUBG with the frame rate set to extreme, and the Mini absolutely crushed it. Now, one thing that I noticed is that when you play PUBG, the image doesn't extend all the way to the left and the right. There's like a little bit of black padding on both sides. Now, I never actually noticed it when I was playing. I noticed it when I was reviewing B-roll for one of my videos. So it's not really something that's taking away from my user experience, but I wanted to share it with you. So like I said, it's my go-to for gaming, and I'm actually really surprised at how much I'm choosing to use it for things like social media. Again, because I have larger iPads available. But there's something so convenient and ergonomically satisfying about this size that I'm sort of organically drawn to it. And that brings me to the question of how is it possible that there's been this super strange polarized reaction to the iPad Mini? I think it comes down to understanding what this device was intended to do and who it's for, because it's not for everyone. And just because it may be a more current release than other iPads, or if it has a more powerful chip, that doesn't mean that it's a better fit for what you want. So make sure that you look at the other iPads in the same range and then pick the one that's right for your needs. Now, one of the best iPads to put up against the Mini 6 is the iPad Air 4. So I definitely recommend that you check out that video right there. Click on my face to subscribe. You know what I always say, buy it nice or buy it twice. Good luck and see you soon.